están? Bueno, es que se ha quitado de aquí para que no interrumpieran la transmisión.
Just powering through. And then I call it the sleep of the innocent and the just. You just like all your thoughts leave your mind. And you think, and you lay down and you think, oh, finally I'm gonna have the most beautiful sleep of my life. And then 3 a.m.
Yeah, melatonin.
Minus 25, minus 30 Celsius winter. And then you come there in September and it's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, my first winter there, I was like, what have we done? We had minus 26 for 2 weeks. And it's a yes, it was just
Yes, this is Nicolas. We met Aránzazu.
Hi.
So do they like usually on list
Que yo sepa.
It's only problematic in the event that my parking runs out.
Oh no, you'll be okay. Where are you living now? Where's your house?
Spadina and St. Clair.
Oh, okay, so you're in
Same
the
place.
in the
Same
neighborhood.
place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't.
Okay. I need to put my handbag here in the corner.
That's okay. I stacked these coffee cups here in my secret corner.
Your secret
Yeah.
So to fill them all up before you
Stefan's
started?
little stash. I wonder where is Michael? I think Michael just...
He's in here.
Eh? No, he's not.
Oh,
Your
he's not in
brother
the room?
is, but
My brother is, yeah.
Michael is out.
Oh, well. He can't miss you. Your big day.
Or maybe he can. Are we going to talk in the microphone? Do we
beside you.
You don't have to, but no, it's because otherwise then I'll just get a bit closer.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today at Tiles, Trends, and Tapas. So we've got three things happening on this lovely day at Hart House: Tiles, Trends, and Tapas. And we're going to be hearing about two of them in this seminar, Tiles and Trends, today. And then the Tapas are going to come just a little bit later. I know that's what you're all here for too, at 1 o'clock. But thank you, a big thank you to Tile of Spain and to everybody at Hart House for helping to organize this wonderful event. My name is Stefan Novakovic. I'm a senior editor at AZURE Magazine here in Toronto. And I'm really lucky today to be joined by Aránzazu González Bernardo, apologies to the Spanish speakers in the room, and Nicolas Koff, who are two of the best and most exciting emerging young designers probably in all of North America. And it's I think a really powerful and impactful time to be doing a talk about Spanish tile and Spanish design today, given the devastating floods that have hit the region of Valencia this month. And you know, we were just talking about it with Arantxa, has family there. Many of the folks here also have connections to Valencia and friends and family there. But in a way, it's an especially appropriate time to celebrate the incredible creative and cultural and design-driven scene that we have in Spain, which is really in large part also concentrated around the city of Valencia. So I think it's an especially good time today to make this event a lovely celebration of Spanish design. So with that, welcome, and can you pass me that? And I'm really thrilled to tell you a little bit about Arantxa and Nico, seated to my right. Arantxa González Bernardo was educated at the Escuela Técnica Superior de Arquitectura in La Coruña.
Nice, perfect.
I practiced. She is Spanish. She's a Spanish architect and a co-founder of Odami, leading one of North America's most acclaimed emerging studios. Established by Arantxa and her partner Michael Foring in 2017, Odami is celebrated for its distinct merging of Spanish and Canadian design sensibilities, creating elegant yet culturally rich interior work which is elevated by its clear passion for materiality and craft. Selected as one of the top architects and designers of 2023 by the Architects newspaper in New York, and lauded as the Design Line's Designer of the Year here in Toronto, the studio of Odami has quickly emerged as a leading practice, thanks to projects such as the Aesop stores in Toronto's Yorkville, which you may have seen and we're going to look at later, as well as the Palisades Village in Los Angeles. Odami's award-winning residential interiors also make really prominent use of ceramics, and particularly Spanish ceramics, with the firm's Beaches House showcasing a rigorous aesthetic unity and a distinctly Spanish sense of texture and flair in its eye-catching bathroom. And seated at the end of the table, we have Nicolas Koff, a co-founder of the Toronto-based practice Office U, and a University of Pennsylvania alumnus who leverages a background in architecture, landscape architecture, and regional planning to lead one of Canada's most exciting emerging practices. The firm's diverse portfolio ranges from co-housing to artist studios across Ontario, while also encompassing educational facilities in the Czech Republic and a recently completed landmark, the National Children's Museum of South Korea, clad entirely in Spanish ceramics. The National Children's Museum of South Korea is defined by its remarkable terracotta facades, which were designed as uneven triangular extrusions that would only be glazed on one side, creating an alternatingly soft or vivid look as one walks around the building. And we're going to learn a lot more about that project and how these guys from Toronto came to design it. But I think for today, a great start for us will be to start with Arantxa and Odami. And I think, you know, we're lucky today to be joined by one of Canada's leading designers who's also Spanish born and educated. So Arantxa, I'm hoping we can start a little bit about your general background, your education in Spain, and how you came to Canada.
Hi everyone. Well, thanks for the kind words. Just the way my mother would say it. I appreciate it. Well, the reason why I landed or ended up in Canada, it was a bit by chance. As you mentioned, I studied architecture in La Coruña, in the northwestern part of Spain. And when I finished, the job market for architecture and buildings was not doing particularly well. So I went to work abroad, and I was working in an architectural office in Graz, Austria. And it was there where I met my partner, my business partner, who is also my husband, Michael, who happened to be from Canada. So that's how we eventually moved to Canada, and we were in Montreal for a little bit, and then I couldn't stand the cold, so we went back to, we came to Toronto, and after working for other firms for a little bit in 2000, we moved to Toronto in 2016, and we started our own practice in 2017.
And, I know we were talking a little bit about the cold and some of the cultural differences. I grew up in Europe myself, and you told me just the other day, until I came to North America, I never saw drywall.
Yes.
And, I think that's probably for a lot of us Europeans the same case. So I'm really curious about your sort of transition into this type of climate, both as a sort of physical climate and a cultural climate, and also a really different type of design culture. When you started working as a designer in Canada, did you find yourself suddenly realizing, oh, people here are doing different things? There's maybe a Canadian sensibility and I have a Spanish sensibility. Or did you come to sort of understand your own work as particularly Spanish in some way?
I think that precisely because my practice is based like on Michael and I, like Michael's Canadian, was trained in Canada and I'm trained in Spain. So I feel like we've managed to have like a blend, but for sure coming to Canada from a country like Spain, it was like, it almost demanded that at least at the very beginning, that I sort of reinvented myself. Construction methods were completely different. The climate was drastically different. It's like a lot. So I think it was a phase of a bit of despair where I almost wonder, like, why did I even bother studying architecture in Spain if, like, I have to learn everything? But then over time, and I think that you learn the things that you need to learn to properly do your job. And after that, it was like it just came to me that it was like, at the end of the day, the main important ideas about design and about architecture that I learned in Spain are perfectly applicable here too. Those are like universal concepts about like how to do things properly and how to create spaces for people and create spaces that belong. And I think that that's something that now over time, I'm still perfecting, but we're trying to do. And I think that
well, I think as we're about to see in just a second, that phase of despair didn't last very long because some of the work that Odami is doing is pretty special. So tell me a little bit about, we have some projects here, a little bit about your approach to design, what kind of sensibilities it has, and then we'll also get into a little bit of talking about ceramics.
Well, when it comes to like design sensibilities, I think that one thing that is very important is like traditionally in Spain, we've had like many layers over many centuries. There's like a very rich history, a complex history, and it almost feels like when approaching design, there's always working with what is existing and a bit the responsibility of making things belong. So I feel like that was the one thing that like for us is like, it didn't start with us and it's not ending with us. We're just given the chance to put another layer in the story of a space. So I think that that's a mindset that I carry with me still to this date. While in Canada, as opposition, I feel like the development of cities happened more rapidly in a more compressed time. So I feel like there's a lot more flexibility and like a higher degree of like freedom when it comes to creativity. So I think that that's why like when we work together, it works very well because we're still trying to have some fun and create something unique, but at the same time we have this idea of like creating spaces that belong and that are appropriate. And I think that this example that was the Aesop store in Yorkville, I think that it exemplifies very well these ideas where like this was like probably our most important project to date. Like Aesop is like a large company, and when they reached out to us, we were like quite surprised. And this was going to be their location in Yorkville. So for us, it was like an opportunity to explore like the history of a neighborhood that nowadays is like known for having these high-end shops, but that has a history that is very rich, a very important Victorian past. And in this case, like what we decided was like, how can we create maybe a little tribute to this Victorian past, but at the same time not be replicating the past. We don't want the store to feel old. So doing a bit of research, we came with like this idea of like using a very traditional component of Victorian construction with these wooden spindles, and basically using it in a very unconventional way. So we used it for like to clad the facade of the space. So there's like some elements in there that these are like some photos that we took like going for a walk in the neighborhood. And the spindles are everywhere. They're like very characteristic from there. So we thought that it was like a good chance to use them in an unconventional way and create something that feels a bit like, you don't know, you cannot tell if it's new or if it's old, which is something that we really like now. This idea of context and trying to merge tradition and innovation in a way, or like things that feel contemporary but that still don't deny like the past, is like this house in the Beaches house. This is an area of Toronto where it's like there's a lot of cottage, almost cottage-looking houses very close to the water. And we were faced with this idea of like a client that had a very contemporary taste. He wanted something that felt very modern, but at the same time, he also wanted it to have this idea of like this feeling of like a cottage house and the warmth that it has, the texture. So the use of the paneling, it was like a bit of like a wink to the past. And then the combination of materials like the wood and the tile at the entrance, which is a Spanish tile, as well as in the bathroom, this combination of like warmth and cold materials, like reminiscent of this idea of the cottage here in Canada. I'm going to, this is like another example of how we can work with brick and respond to the proportions of the street and still create something that feels like contemporary. This was a house in Rosedale. Unfortunately, it never got built. And also embracing like the quirkiness of the spaces. Sometimes the space, it feels a bit raw and there's a beauty to it. So I think that is something that we try to do as well. And this is like our design for the store in Pacific Palisades in Los Angeles. Basically, it's a store, it's in an area of Los Angeles that has a lot of like greenery and really beautiful houses. And one of them is the one on the picture at the bottom, which is the Ray Cappy residence, his own residence. With lots of like horizontal planes that adjust to landscape, The landscape is really steep. And basically we thought of like how to work with that and reflect a bit this spirit of Palisades in the store. For that we went to the green and we used like basically the different display of the store happened horizontally in different levels. And then additionally we added like, we wanted to include like an interior garden inside that reflected this like lush, this vegetation, the abundance of vegetation in Pacific Palisades. So we introduced a skylight in order to be able to achieve that. And here's like a photo of the store.
Well, there are Aesop stores, and then there are Aesop stores. And, you know, your work in Yorkville and in Pacific Palisades, these are Aesop stores. But I think, you know, what's really so palpable in your descriptions and in just looking at the work is this merging of sensibilities, that something about the context of Los Angeles, something about the context of Toronto, is really clearly and palpably expressed in the work, but at the same time, it's combined with a sort of flair and a warmth, and there's, you know, a sort of Odami signature and a Spanish signature at the same time that it expresses a lot about the places that it's in. And a part of that, as you've already touched on, you know, is ceramics are an important material that you're using in these projects. So I'm curious, you know, also as they're sort of a big part of Spanish design culture, why do you think, you know, that ceramics have been such an important part of Spanish design? And is it different or challenging in a new way or creating new opportunities when we try to use them in North American contexts?
I think that like there's a huge tradition of tile and ceramic clay-based materials in Spain and mostly in all Mediterranean countries. The reason being is likely like the availability of material as well as the convenience, like working with tiles, working with like clay components. It's like generally smaller units that can be placed by hand. So I think that over many, many years, I think that like it was the Roman Empire that started this, and ever since it's been like extremely like present in, it's part of our cultural heritage, I would say. Like you can see and assess different periods of time and history in Spain by looking at the way the tiles were done, like the addition of glazing. Like there's a lot of it that can be expressed like, that you can learn about our history and about our culture just by looking at that. And regarding like the question was like, how can we bring that Spanish like tradition to North America? I think historically it has been done. One figure that is not very known, it was Rafael Guastavino, who was from Valencia. And Rafael Guastavino, yeah, I had like, I'm just going to go through, sorry, I just got a bit here. No, that's me. And it's a story that I actually learned after like I learned it while like living in Canada, and I had no idea about this. But Rafael Guastavino was a Spanish architect who moved to New York, and he was very knowledgeable in the construction techniques, like the brick vault that was like done in Spain. And basically this idea of tradition and innovation that I think it's very Spanish, it's basically what he did a long time ago. He went to New York, he worked with that traditional vault construction. He innovated and included new materials like Portland cement and created a system that he patented. And the system was like self-supporting and non-combustible, which worked very well for him at a time where the big fires of Boston and Chicago had just happened. So when he presented this idea, it felt almost like too good to be true. So what he did, and he felt like he was not getting it out there, and again with this like entrepreneurial spirit, very Spanish entrepreneurial spirit, he called a lot of journalists and big developers, and he created the vault, in front of them. And then he set a massive fire under the vault that was like burning for hours. And that was how he was able to prove that it was not going to collapse, that it was not going to, like, that it was working. And after they saw that, he of course did very well for himself. And upon his death, the New York Times called him the architect of New York. He did hundreds of buildings in New York, over 1,000 buildings in the States. These are two examples. This is the Ellis Island City Hall on the left. Okay, I was just getting confused. And the other one is the Oyster Bar in Grand Central Station in New York. So I feel like this spirit of innovation is a way to prove that this has been done historically, but of course it hasn't stopped there. And I think that innovation continues, and I think that is something that Nico will be able to talk very well now.
No, you will, I'm sure. But Arantxa, thank you so much for that. And I think one of the things that really stands out to me about that is this combination of heritage and something that's very much rooted in place and rooted in the earth, obviously ceramics and tiles coming from the combination of clay and earth and fire, which are sort of really fundamental elements that also sort of contribute to a deep, rich history of sort of recyclability and long-lastingness, but also combined with some pretty incredible innovation. Like, I think that story of setting the fire underneath the ceiling also shows us how really such simple, elemental things can be adapted into really exciting new contexts. And I think we're going to hear about some of those really new and exciting contexts from Nico. We got such a great sort of background about the deep, rich, and cultural heritage of Spanish design and of Spanish ceramics. And now we are going to look into the future.
That's a bit of a tall order.
Well, I wonder maybe then we can start with a really simple thing. I mean, Office U, which is a sort of a wonderful boutique Toronto-based firm, recently unveiled the remarkable project of the National Children's Museum of Korea. And man, what an accomplishment. but also a great showcase for using Spanish ceramics and Pile of Spain products on a really global, international scale. But before we get into the specifics of the design, I'm sure many of us in the audience are curious, how did you guys end up getting this project, and what was the story there?
Oh, well, okay. So, well, first of all, thank you. Thank you very much for having me here. It's great to be able to talk about this project, especially now that it's been completed. We've talked about it before, but this is really one of the first times that we get to talk about it post-completion. I mean, the question you just asked is a question that I think I ask myself pretty much every week. And I've asked myself that question every week in the past 8 years. We weren't a firm back when we got the project. We were just a grouping of 3 people that were working in separate firms that had different skill sets. So we had skill sets in architecture, in landscape architecture, in regional planning, and lots of different interests. And we would meet after hours and have conversations about what we believe in, what are our values, what the direction of architecture should be. And we started really working together on competitions, and most of them at the beginning were ideas competition. And the issue with those is that whether you won or lost those, and we won a few of them, you never got any proof of concept. So you could provide something really fascinating or really interesting to you, but you would never be able to really get any form of proof of concept. The kind of proof is in the pudding, or in the building in this case. So we started looking around and looking for competitions that could yield built work. And we had to look for competitions because that was our only way to really acquire work on the scale at which we wanted to really test out our assumptions. And those were about integration of ecologies and kind of social context within large public projects. And so we found, I want to say on Bustler, could have been on Azure.
Let's say it was on Azure.
Let's assume it was on Azure. Probably was on Bustler. We found this competition for the new National Museum complex of South Korea, and it, in many ways, seemed too good to be true. It was an enormous site, 20 hectares, 12 cultural institutions, and arguably it checked all the boxes. It required a knowledge about architecture, landscape architecture, planning, everything that we wanted to kind of bring together. And best of all, it was anonymous. And that was the great thing, because that meant that the project would be judged on its own merits, on its own designs, on its own qualities, and it wouldn't be judged on the fact that, yes, we're not a 50-year-old office, we're a 5-day-old office, or it's we don't have 5 projects of a similar scope realized in the past 5 years. We had none of that. So we worked, and we worked hard, and we worked late, very, very late. I remember one night when we had to submit a hand-bound, hand-stitched booklets to the competition. That was one of the requirements. And we were all sitting on the floor of a living room, just hand-stitching booklets at 3 a.m., like our fingers kind of just like, we couldn't find a place that would do it in the way that was specified in the brief. We had to do it. It was late at night, and our fingers were just bleeding from the needle. We didn't know what to do it. It was just horrible. But also some kinds of fun. And surprisingly enough, we shortlisted against some pretty steep odds. We went against Zaha and Morphosis and a bunch of really, really, really big firms. And that was because of our approach. And we had an approach that was a bit different from what they were proposing, which was based on really integrating the different layers of the site. And the site was a fascinating site. It was really diverse on its perimeter. It had lots of different ecosystems, rivers, creeks, fields, productive landscapes, a lot of different things happening on its perimeter. And we would have to also bring together a lot of different cultural institutions. So we decided to create something that wasn't really an iconic site, but a framework where each institution and their identity would be defined by a merging of that institution's program and of the nearby ecosystem. So welcoming the ecosystems within the site and the landscapes within the site. And that really took us to the next phase. And at that point, there was no other choice. We had to we had to leave our jobs. We had to start working on this full time. We had 1 week or 1 week and a half to find a partner firm in Korea, to find a lawyer, to agree to all of our terms, to do all the legal stuff. It was to establish ourselves in an office. We're in an office. We had no, we barely had a license. I mean, we had done great work before, but it was a very, very demanding time. And then we went to Korea. We went on a site visit, and that required us spending more time than we had if we had day jobs. So we left our jobs and we kind of went all out on this. And it was still a very, very tenuous, very stressful time because we didn't know that we were going to get anything. So we worked for about another month and a half, I would say, with our partner architect, and had to go to Korea. We presented at a public forum, public presentation with a jury. And against all odds, we managed to kind of put all of that together. We presented, I think, on a Friday, perhaps, and then we had a few days before we would hear back. And so I think those perhaps were maybe some of the most stressful days we've had because we had given up so much. I mean, we may have made the worst decision of our lives, given up careers, given up jobs, just to go and accrue potentially some level of debt to go to Korea and potentially get nothing out of it. I remember I had to leave town for those 2 days just to be able to kind of like focus on things. Went to this Buddhist monastery to learn about Korean cooking from a nun. That was fantastic. But it was Monday morning, and got a message from our partner, and of course the reception was horrible in the monastery. It was in the mountains. Bad idea. So I had to run down to see what the message was, and thankfully enough, we had gotten the project. But that kind of got us started. Anyways, long drawn out answer to a short question. But.
No, it's a pretty remarkable story, and I know both of you. You said it might have been the worst decision of your life. Arantxa, you talked about the despair of the Canadian winters. Don't worry, this is just how architects talk, and I bet you in 10 years, both of them will be too famous to do talks with me anymore. I can tell you that right now. But, the project got built, Nico, didn't it? So tell me a little bit about, you've talked about this sort of broad concept of how the site is a vessel for the landscape and the sort of planning components of it, but it also became a real showcase for ceramics. So tell me a little bit about how the design developed for the individual children's museum and why you decided that, ceramics were going to be such a strong component of this project.
It's another very, very long story. So buckle up. So this was the master plan for the museum complex. And the Children's Museum is the one in the bottom left. And the idea was that every single museum, and they're all organized there and connected by this porous arcade, is influenced by the adjacent landscape that's already existing near the site. And we're really allowing, or at least over the years, we want to be allowing that connection through. And so this one was a kids museum, and it was connected to an area with smaller, kind of more curated trees, to the fields, to the central park, more play areas, but it needed an area which was potentially more free for the taking, free for kind of being occupied by different events, different activities. And so when we went and designed into it, we wanted a few different things. So there were a few qualities that we wanted to go for in that project. One, we wanted a material that was tactile, and that was friendly, and that was natural. Two, we wanted a material with which we could do something that's at least somewhat fun for a kids museum. And three, and contradicting number two, we wanted a material that would be able to create a facade that effaced itself and that would become a backdrop for a whole host of different activities. Because what we were designing was not a completed product, it was a stage for different exhibitions, different activities to take place, and for the landscape to grow, and for the kids to grow with the landscape. And so that's kind of how we went with it, and we arrived at this kind of idea of using a natural material, and then letting the courtyard, as it grows, develop into this wilder area with little installations, play areas, be taken over by the kids, and really have this landscape kind of grow into it. And so, I mean, honestly, when we started, we weren't going with tile. Our first, and I'll get to how we found that tile was the perfect material instead. But when we started, our idea was always to use wood. And in many ways, that was also kind of potentially us reading into a Korean perception of what it meant to be Canadian. And that meant building everything in wood. And we would have liked to perhaps to do that, but for about 10 different reasons, that was vetoed by the government because that was a non-starter. There were a bunch of issues with the seismic code and fire and all of these things that they wouldn't be able to catch up to some of the regulations that we have available here. But so we went through a whole process, and over might have taken a couple of years. The site, when we moved from the master plan to the design of the actual museum, was changed. And we inherited a site that was much tighter for the kids' museum and that had much bigger requirements. So we had to add things that weren't part of the scope before. So like the entrance to the massive museum storehouse that was going to be located under the whole complex, which was also part of our scope. But so now we had to have the loading and the access to that, and that changed the whole economics of the project. And so we looked at manufacturers that were pre-approved. This is a governmental project, so a lot of times you go with manufacturers that are pre-approved in Korea. And so we went and looked at those, and our biggest concern was that we found no way to really ensure the quality of the finished product. We felt that, and it was more than a feeling, in Korea, for this project, for a lot of public projects, the architect doesn't get to do the CA. The CA is the design architect is only lightly involved in the CA, but a third-party company is hired to do the construction administration. So a lot can happen at that stage. And working with a system that wouldn't have been directly shipped on site and installed very easily installed, would have meant that whatever design we produced would have gone and value engineered to no ends, and we had no idea what it was going to be, and it was just too much of a risk to take. And all of a sudden, and then we had considered ceramics at the beginning, but it seemed too expensive. But at that point, and I think we were a few years into the project at that point, and we had the government body, or at least the representatives, had changed. We revisited ceramics, and we found that it was probably the best material to allow us to have something that's natural, that's tactile, that gives us the ability to create both kind of matte and reflective and kind of rough and soft and a lot of different inviting experiences within the site.
And the tile that you ended up choosing, a tile of Spain product, was actually, you guys had quite a complicated sort of brief of what you wanted it to do. It has to be extruded, it has to be partially glazed, but only on one side. It has to have a combination of roughness and smoothness. So specifying something like that, doesn't just happen out of a catalog. So how did you end up getting to the final product and getting to a tile of Spain product along the way?
I mean, with an infinite budget, we could have specified it very easily from a catalog. And one of the main issues is that when we first designed this, there were supposed to be 2 extrusions per volume. There are 3 volumes to the building. So there's one kind of bigger volume for the special exhibitions, one main volume at the back, which is blue, and then one little kids volume, which is the shortest one, which is the red volume. And then, so each of them was supposed to have different extrusions of different sizes. And of course, we didn't have the budget for that, so we were just told, you get 1 extrusion. Do the best. And so but we wanted to still have that diversity. And we didn't want to just create a building where you had just a fully glazed facade, because that would have been overly monolithic. We wanted something that had a bit of that pinstripe effect to make it a bit more fun, while still kind of effacing itself. And so we really needed to have 2 different panels. And that took a bit of a process. At first, we went to a few different manufacturers, some in Italy, where we went with our designer, like, well, we want to do this. We want to have I can show you here. We want to have panels, some of which could be, and all of those are the same extrusion, some of which are fully glazed, and some of which are only partially glazed. So to still have that matte and really tactile kind of quality to the material. And we were told, I guess in no uncertain terms, by a lot of manufacturers. We went to some Italian manufacturers, some manufacturers in Korea, and we were told it's not possible. You can't do that, and that's mostly because I'm going to have to stand up. This. So this moment here, this line, no one had the confidence to be able to make this clean edge. So they were all telling, we were told, you have to split the panel, it has to be 2 extrusions. We can't afford 2 extrusions, there's no other option. So it's one of the scenarios in which the decision was made by one single detail, and really the only manufacturer that was willing to do that was the tile Spain manufacturer, which decided, and they told us, we approached them and they were like, you know what, okay, we'll try it. Like, we won't know until we try it. And they just put one of their machines out of commission, and they just MacGyvered it and found a way to really get that clean edge, because otherwise we would have to like paint it by hand and didn't have the budget to employ someone to just glaze by hand. So it was one of the things, and they worked with us, and they really kind of like helped us go through. We went through so many different. My son loves this slide because he thinks this looks like mango syrup. But it's we went through this whole process where we went and tried all kinds of different glazes, and they, in some ways, went with it every step of the way, and we felt like they were committed to the project, and it was fantastic to have someone that was on your side that wasn't just providing a product and then disappearing. They had skin in the game. They cared about it. They were willing to decommission one of their machines to just experiment with us and try to make this happen. And I mean, that for us was fantastic, and so we were able to get all of these panels manufactured. That was, I think, the very first panel that came out, and it was a really pretty amazing feeling when it actually came out. That's when they were delivered on site, and we kind of started assembling them. And that was also a very stressful moment when we arrived around the whole building and had to see whether our math was okay and whether we would end up with 2 different panels, or whether we would end up with the same panel twice and never be able to look at this again. But worked out.
Wow, and I think it worked out pretty well. I mean, certainly in the photos you can see it's a really elegant looking building and a lovely looking project. Especially I'm curious, as the years go by and children animate the space and the landscape comes in, how all these factors and these remarkable ceramics are going to come together. But for now, what a remarkable accomplishment to have finished the National Children's Museum of Korea. And I think both of you are still, already really accomplished practitioners, but still at a relatively, early phase in your careers where there's a lot more to come. And I know one of the things we've spoken about a little bit informally is, for both of your backgrounds, Arantxa and Nico, you've had a lot of experience now starting to use ceramics in different contexts. Here, you've used it in the Korean context. I wonder if we can start with you, Nico, as a Toronto-based practitioner. Now you're also exploring using ceramics and Tile of Spain products here in Canada in all sorts of unexpected ways. So tell me a little bit about how that thought process is going and why you're looking to keep using these materials.
Right. Well, so before we even tried to use it in a Canadian context, we somehow we fell into a bit of an interesting space where we've been doing a lot of children-related projects. So first of all, the Children's Museum, but we've also been doing quite a bit of school projects. And we feel like ceramics as a material is very engaging, because not only can you glaze it, creating that fun reflection and so those kind of that very interesting kind of just engagement from kids, but also you can leave it raw, and it's then a tactile material that feels is very natural, but that we found that kids really interact well with it. And so we've been working on a few different projects, and those ones were in Europe, and this is the school that we one a few years ago in the Czech Republic, and which is going into construction early next year. It's the first new school to be built in Prague, near the historic center of Prague in nearly 100 years. And so we had, over the years, kind of looked at ways to integrate ceramics and different types of kind of more earthy materials within these spaces. And in this case, it's more of a framework that really allows children to express their creativity and gain a sense of agency towards the city, to really become stewards of the city, and environmentally, socially. And so we've created this building as a framework where they can express themselves. But we also created little moments, so entry sequences and entry moments, where you can have a bit more color. And so we're considering ceramic for this one as well, because we felt like it was a great material to do that. And we've considered it on other projects. So we did this master plan for a cultural park and museum in the south of South Korea, in Namdo, which was to be both renaturalized or reforested space, but also a cultural hub for the craftsmanship of the area, and a museum to the history of the area. So we combined this approach to renaturalization and to bringing back pockets of traditional productive landscapes to support the crafts of the area. So created these little villages they became craft villages. But within that, we had these monoliths that would be partially clad in ceramic tiles, and we had looked at tile of Spain for that, because we felt like, at least for that portion, that base portion, there would be a good match. The rest would be all recycled from the local context. Unfortunately, this one, so we were finalists for this one, didn't get built, didn't make it didn't win it, but we still felt like it was a good showcase for the project. But recently, we've been looking at using a Tile of Spain product for a project we have in Toronto, and it's interesting because in Toronto there's a little bit of a stigma, and we've gotten that talking to different clients, where there was an era when brick buildings or brick facades were glazed, and that created a completely impervious or impermeable facade, and so whenever moisture would get in, it would cause the bricks to kind of pop out, and it would just kind of, it's not really what you want. But that's not a problem now. I mean, that's a stigma that's outdated, because the systems have evolved so much. You don't create envelopes that are airtight like that, especially with materials like this. And if you do, you do it in a way where it's well integrated within a facade and there's an air gap behind. So it's not really a problem, and it's a material that's very fit to be used here. So we started kind of looking for this project that we're doing in Toronto, where we're converting this century-old garage in the back of a property into this new residential building. And so we're reusing the old walls of the garage, and then the roof, unfortunately, cannot be salvaged. We're reusing some of the old walls, and then we're recreating new buildings within that, and courtyards, and a lot of kind of moments of transition from landscape to architecture back to landscape. And so it's a very kind of interesting point from our point of view, because we felt that given the interaction with the landscape that we wanted to create within this project, the architecture needed a datum that was a bit more earthy, a bit more natural, and so we wanted to create this datum within the project where we would have these tiles at kind of human scale, where you could interact with something more tactile before kind of moving to a different material, and that would be a bit more engaging and a bit more attuned to and a bit more in touch with the landscape and surroundings. So we're hopeful that we're going to be able to do more projects. This one is currently being underpinned, at least over the existing walls, so it's moving ahead.
Well, it's really exciting to see so much new stuff from Office U, and I think for me, even just looking at that really simple photo of the bricks and the tiles, there's a certain complementary quality of textures and earthiness that you find in both materials. Brick, obviously, is a sort of quintessentially Torontonian material, and then the tile seems to sit quite comfortably alongside it. But I know Odami is doing a whole bunch of exciting new work as well. And Arantxa, you sort of skipped through those slides at the end there. But I'm curious for you as well, what are some upcoming projects and how are you thinking about incorporating ceramics and Tile of Spain products in a Canadian context?
Well, right now, this was a conversation that we were having earlier on. I think that it's very important, like, to understand, like, as architects and as designers, when we specify materials, there's a responsibility behind that. And in a market where there's so many materials that were like completely, even sometimes I'm a bit overwhelmed, like, what do we use here? It's like, there's a lot. I think it's important to like really trust materials that are sustainable, that are environmentally responsible, that are fabricated in countries where people's, like, workers' rights are being respected, there's a fair salary. So I think that that's very important, and for us it's something that when we specify a material, we always make sure to understand where it's coming from. It's very hard. We haven't had projects like Nico where we really have to dive deep into understanding the intricate parts of how they get fabricated, but at least we do like to have this idea of where things are coming from and how they're fabricated. And I think that's where Tile of Spain is like a guarantee that, like, you're using materials from like place that is like, there's a responsibility, a social responsibility, and I think that as designers is important. So for us, it's not like we just specify tiles from Spain. We always want to do what's best for the project, but it's funny because right now we just finished a restaurant and like a clothing store that we're actually photographing tomorrow, and this clothing store was like 5,500 square feet, and both the facade and the floor is tile, and it's a Spanish tile, and we didn't like, we don't go to places like, just give me Spanish tile, but it was like, it felt very unique, and it had this inherent texture to it. It felt like almost like craftsmanship, like something made out of, like, I know it's like manufactured, but it had this like feeling that both the client and us really liked. And talking to the supplier, he was the one that told me it was actually a tile from Spain, and it's like a supplier that we like to work with precisely because of this like engagement with responsible sourcing. And he was telling us that right now like 80% of the tile that they have, it comes from Spain, which I was like, as a Spaniard, I was very happy to hear. But right now we have those two projects that we just finished, and we're currently about to wrap up a bakery in Yorkville, and we are currently working on a spa where we will also be using tile. Is also a great material. Our winters are very harsh. There's salt on the street. There's everything. So especially in commercial settings, sometimes like some materials don't last very well. And I feel like tile is a very resistant material. And we're now working on a spa where the floor is going to be also tile. And on 3 residential projects where hopefully we'll get to also specify some nice tiles from Spain.
And that's just the projects with tile. Man, oh man. I can't wait to see what comes next for Odami and for Office U. Before we open the floor to a couple of questions from the audience, let's have a big round of applause for Arantxa and Nico today. Man, really an inspiring look at the future of Canadian design and how making responsible choices comes into that. And boy, what unique trajectories from both of you. And thank you all for coming today. I do think we have a couple of minutes for some questions from the audience, if we have anything from Nico and Arantxa. All right, we got one.
So far, it's gone well. We haven't had really any issue with that. It's, I mean, I would say that perhaps one of the biggest concerns would be things like snow and salt rather than kids. It's pretty sturdy. I would say kids are sturdy too, but I would say that it's sturdier than, than any part of a child.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean by the kid.
But
in a public setting,
no, absolutely.
around
Absolutely, and honestly, there's kind of two things to that. One, it's fairly sheltered. We have the canopies going around, kind of protecting it, to some extent, at least at grade. And in a public setting, we want people to interact with it. We want people to be touching it, and if it chips, it chips. If it shows the desire lines of the people and the intent of the people and where they're transiting, that's fine. It's a blank canvas for people. Like we're absolutely okay with that happening, because a building is not finished when it's delivered. It's only starting. It's only the beginning. We want it to evolve and to change. And if some of that happens, we're absolutely okay with it.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for joining us today for Tiles, Trends, and Tapas. Well, we've made it through the Tiles and Trends, and a big thank you to Nico and Arantxa. It's almost time for the tapas. But before we get to that lovely and fun part of the day, I do want to tell you a little bit about the 11 Tile of Spain companies that we have joining us today just over in the next room to our right. And we are really lucky to have such a great showcase of Spanish design here in Toronto. We have ADEX USA traditional tiles for contemporary people that are rooted in heritage. ADEX is a manufacturing company with a rich tradition dating back all the way to 1897. From their facilities in Valencia, they supply high-quality products to the North American market through 3 distribution centers in Florida, California, and New Jersey. They have an unwavering focus on detail, which sets them apart, offering a wide selection of trims, decorative accessories, and finishing pieces to enhance and elevate any design project. We also have with us Azteca Ceramica, ceramic solutions for the interior sector. Azteca is a manufacturer of high added value ceramic tile solutions with a deep commitment to satisfying the construction requirements and design specifications for projects and clients worldwide. It strives to be the reference partner when thinking about quality, design, and service adapted to any need. And we have Cevica.
Sort of.
Tell me.
Cevica?
Cevica. The Tile Atelier. Cevica was founded in 1986, and since then they have been dedicated to the design and production of special ceramic pieces, and particularly small format tiles. They manufacture wall and floor tiles in formats ranging from 5 by 5 centimeters to 30 by 30 centimeters. Experts in developing any type of ceramic color and flexible in production allows them to develop products according to any project demand. And Decocer, ceramics that speak of emotions. Decocer is specialized in small sizes, always exclusive and always custom made. They provide both their own exclusive collections and bespoke designs, carefully tailored to meet the unique needs of each client. This allows them to customize tiles in terms of format, color, finish, and design, ensuring a perfect fit for any project. And Estudio Cerámico, change to be exclusive. At Estudio Cerámico, each ceramic collection is a testament to their dedication to craft and cutting-edge design, pushing the boundaries of creativity. Their collections offer unique and versatile solutions that bring personality, elegance, and exclusivity to any environment, meeting the demands of contemporary architecture and interior design and transforming any space into a work of art. Natucer, the beauty of ceramic imperfection. A company specialized in the production of extruded porcelain tiles for interiors and exteriors. Specialists in all types of pieces to make a perfect finish, like large steps of 48 inches, or technique pieces for pools. Wall tiles that have been created without limitations in colors, size, textures, and 3Ds for all types of projects to achieve new visual and tactile experiences. And we have the Paranda Group, driven by a passion for detail. Paranda Group has been a leading major changes and developing world-renowned brands in ceramic tile sector for nearly 200 years. Paranda, Museum, and Harmony. Since its inception, Paranda Group has grown to become a foundation of innovation, research, and technology, as well as the talent of people to produce high-quality products that also respect the environment. And we have Porcelanosa, the finest tile solutions for the home. Porcelanosa is a Spanish company founded in 1973 in Villarreal. It is a leading manufacturer of ceramic products, kitchen cabinetry, and countertops, bathroom vanities and fixtures, as well as architectural solutions ranging from ventilated facades to ceramic installation materials. We also have with us STN Ceramica, a world of possibilities with tiles. STN Ceramica provides innovative, high-quality, and efficient ceramic solutions at affordable prices that also address clients' needs through design, technology, and sustainability. Today, STN has established itself as a worldwide leader in the industry, setting the standard while staying aligned with both current and emerging trends and market demands. And we have Tau. Tau Ceramica has become a global reference brand in the ceramic sector, known for technological and aesthetic quality of their products, their consistent commitment to innovation and development, and social and environmental responsibility. In recent years, the brand has also stood in the area of digital transformation, a trend-setting brand in continuous evolution. And finally, we have with us Vives, Feeling Ceramics. Established in 1957, Vives is one of the oldest and most prestigious tile manufacturers in Spain. This long history has been possible thanks to its continuing dedication to developing innovative products while ensuring that quality is never sacrificed. And if you've ever been hungry in New York and you've went down to Hudson Yards to Mercado Little Spain, you'll find that's an incredible selection of Vives Ceramicas. And I know as I've been going through the 11 manufacturers, I can feel the room getting hungrier and hungrier as time goes on. But the good news is we are all done, so the hour of tapas has arrived. Please feel free to help yourself, and thank you again for joining us, and let's hear one final round of applause for Arantxa and Nico. Let's get some tapas.